Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashtarothi, the voice of New Eden, and it is October 15th, YC126, and this is the Eve Universe Show! Welcome, welcome, welcome. How's it going, guys? I do want to make sure that we circle back. I've been wanting to talk to you about this for like a week now. I had my I did my interview with Frozen Fallout for the CSM. And in that interview, I asked him his feelings about Emanation Lock, not knowing what they were. And his answer really got me to thinking. And I got to tell you guys, I think I've changed my mind on Emanation Lock. So I do want to argue with the point to you guys and kind of give you guys why I think that the Emanation Lock makes a lot of sense and how this relates to everything else that's been going on when it comes to the setup for Revenant. All right. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. All right. Okay. While I am not alone in my positions, I have been probably one of the most vocal opponents against a lot of the changes that have been done to Zarzakh thanks to the null blocks. The addition of bubbles into Zarzakh made Zarzakh nearly inhospitable. The only reason why we got away with it before was because Zarzakh was so unpopular because of the fact that nobody wanted to live there because of the threat to it, that it wasn't really worth messing with people with bubbles in Zarzakh very often. And we really only saw it a few times to take out, like, I think it was fraternity fleets as they were traveling through Zarzakh, which ultimately was what the nullsec people wanted. I stress that, like, being able to take out an entire fleet with one Dictor bubble seems a little bit... They wouldn't be happy if it happened to them. So now we have Emanation Lock. And my knee-jerk reaction to it, fine, it's good that we have gotten rid of the bubbles, but I was really not a big fan of this solution because as a person who lived in Zarzakh, I valued all of the different functionality of Zarzakh and the ability to get from one low sec to the other low sec or one null sec to, getting between them was very convenient. And as I pointed out in my video, the ability for people to join the Angel Cartel or Garistus was made significantly more straightforward by being able to just go through Zarzakh to go one more jump to your respective nullsec systems, sign in, and then come back, and then you're now part of it. But if you're coming from either Turner or Alsavoinen, you'll have to wait 6 hours in order to go through it, which isn't going to work for people that are just trying to join it for a little bit. Now, you can go around. There are other ways to join the militia, as it was pointed out, but that was a lot of my big concern. However, I had an interview with Frozen Fallout that was posted about a week ago. He's running for the CSM. He's a faction warfare candidate. And as part of that, I asked him about Emanation Lock. Now, first of all, I had to tell him what Emanation Lock is because I'm the only nerd that actually knows the real name for all these mechanics. But I asked him that question without knowing what his answer was going to be, assuming that as a person that lived in that area, he would be rar, GERD, nullsec. Why is nullsec messing with other people's stuff? Just because they want their way, just like me, right? But he had a much more nuanced answer that really challenged me quite a bit. You can go watch the interview if you want to see that whole thing, but it got me to thinking. And I strive to reframe this situation for you guys. And let's look at it from a game design perspective, okay? You have different user stories, use cases, however you want to call it, right? Whenever you're developing any kind of software or any kind of anything you're designing, you like to think about like, okay, who's going to use this and how are they going to use it? So that way we can anticipate the way that different users use things. And therefore we can support the different ways that users use things, right? Somebody might go to Facebook to check in with their friends. They might go to Facebook to post news. A user who is a grandmother who is staying connected with their family is a different user case than a brand manager who is managing their social media feed. But they are both users of Facebook. And so the people who are designing the tools of that make Facebook work need to keep both of those users in mind and make sure it does what both of those users need to do, right? So from that perspective, we can think of Zarzakh as a certain amount of like functionality for different user cases, okay? So the thing that got me was there are two kinds of people who use Zarzakh. People that live in Zarzakh and people that don't live in Zarzakh but exploit its usefulness, okay? And of the people that live in Zarzakh, there are two kinds of people. There are people that fight for the pirates and people that don't. They might be faction warfare pilots. They might be whatever, right? The problem is that nullsec is unhappy because of the way that this deals with power projection. Now, they could just push back. They could double down. They could be like, no, get used to it. You know, whatever. That was an option that they could do. Each person at least has some sort of say on their own sandbox. And there is absolutely a case to be made about the impact of Zarzakh when it comes to navigation from a null block consideration. Ultimately speaking, it was only the user case. Like, how do you deal with the use case of null blocks using it for a highway without disrupting any of the use cases of the people that live there? And that's what got me to thinking about like, well, okay, I can be mad that we lost functionality to Zarzakh, but do I actually use that functionality, right? Now, it was very in my face because the event required doing stuff on both sides of the gates. Therefore, you couldn't move between. But I even noted at the time that that's arguably a good thing because that forces trade between the two sides and kind of makes it 4 different isolated zones, which is actually kind of cool, right? So that's not necessarily it. If I am going into Zarzakh, or if I'm going into the war zone, I'm probably using the shipcaster, which doesn't have anything to do with emanation lock. If I go out, if I go out from either direction, that doesn't have anything to do with emanation lock. It only affects something coming in. So if I'm coming in as a pirate, I can go out the way I came, or I can go out through the shipcaster. If I need to go from one side to the other side, like that might be a thing, but I can't really think of a time besides, oh, I just want to get into angel space more conveniently or whatever, right? Which even then, if you just hang out in Zarzakh all day, chances are you don't have an emanation lock. You can just go to whichever direction you want, right? The thing that got me was this idea that emanation locks you to the same gate. And I think that this is the critical piece because it doesn't disrupt logistics, which is the biggest use case that would be a problem to disrupt within Zarzakh, right? So if you're hauling things in, if you've stashed a bunch of stuff in Turner and you're moving it into Zarzakh and you're going back and forth, you can do that indefinitely because your emanation lock is to that gate. Who's bringing things? Who has to pick up some stuff here and then pick up stuff over on the other side? Especially since Alcivoin doesn't even have a fucking structure to put things in or station. So like, boy, yeah. I hope the yes, it would be allowing people to just join from the Angels or the Garistas from inside of the Fulcrum would definitely fix it. But my point is that I think that the emanation lock is low-key genius. It manages to disrupt the use case that nullsec was mad about without disrupting the use cases that the pirates use Zarzakh for. The value of Zarzakh has not been diminished for those who live in Zarzakh. In fact, it has only been improved because now those who do not live in Zarzakh but wish to exploit it for their own ends cannot do so. One of the biggest problems that we have, like in faction warfare and whatnot, is when you have something that has its own internal like reward system and things to buy into, but yet someone on the outside can exploit it. They don't give a shit about your little internal whatevers. They just want their thingy. And so they're going to ruin things for everybody. That's when you get problems. When you incentivize something so much that people that don't care about it want to do it because of the thing that it provides, you have run into a problem. That is why we have a problem in pirate faction warfare, because the people that are joining pirate faction warfare don't give a shit about the Deathless. They only care about getting pirate BPCs, and therefore there's no incentive for them to actually care about the major objectives. In fact, there's no incentive for them to work with anyone. So, arguably, removing the purpose of Zarzakh that caused people outside of Zarzakh to be interested in exploiting the value of Zarzakh is arguably a good thing for those who wish to live in Zarzakh. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Did I do it? Did I convince you? Now, I was also thinking about this. I was also thinking about this from the perspective of skyhooks and whatnot, and Revenant and all these things, and even the information that we got about the new sites. And like in the same notion, the issue that I think that we might run, it's a big if. Which part is if? Which is the big if? I like I said, I don't see it getting in the way of people that want to live or use Zarzakh for itself, or even support Zarzakh's market. That's the thing I care about the most, to be honest. I just want to buy my ships in Zarzakh without having to worry about anything. Here's the fucking clever thing, okay? Here's the clever thing. The new stuff that they're getting in Nullsec from the mercenary dens has to be turned into Zarzakh, which means they still need Zarzakh. They still need it for some purpose, to exploit it for their resources. But it's not going to be with 100-man fleets. It's going to be just people trying to cash in, right? Which means they've actually flipped the script on this. Now, instead of the fact that you can use our stuff without us even liking it, now you need our structure. You could actually just start, like, the idea of like just camping out and killing people that come in to try to turn in their stuff, perfectly valid activity to do in Zarzakh now. So I find it really interesting that Nullsec will still need to access Zarzakh, which will make some places in Nullsec easier to use than other places in Nullsec, by the way. But yeah, do you think it's worth it to feed Zarzakh market? Would people buy stuff there? So, I mean, it's hard for me to, I would, but, I will say that, like, before Emanation Lock, when I went into Zarzakh, I'd be sad. There'd be like 4 people, and 3 of them, like, two of them were clearly alts of each other. But I'm looking, there's 10 people in Zarzakh right now, which is still not that much, but I think that Zarzakh also has a bit more churn than a lot of other locations. Like, I think that Zarzakh is now growing. I think that the more the Zarzakh market is effective, like when we were standing up the Dodixie market, or like when I was talking to my guys about wanting to bring back the Dodixie market, you know, they were very focused on finding what was profitable. And I was very focused on finding what was missing. Because the problem is that if I go to into the station and I open up my fit and I hit buy all, and I cannot then hit buy and fit, you failed.
You lose! Good day, sir!
I'm going to go somewhere else to fit my ship and not try that again for a while, probably, right? Very true with like Dodixie, right? If you can't just hit fit all and get all of the modules you need, chances are you're just going to learn to go to Jita, right? You're not going to buy a few things in Dodixie, probably for a premium, and then go and get like the remaining pieces from Dodixie and bring them in. That doesn't make any sense. So it isn't even about whether or not everything's a good deal or a bad deal or whatever. It's about how functional is the market. How many different fits that people use can you just hit fit and buy everything that you need? The outer systems would be too heavily camped because of the hauling. It is a problem with the fact that it's hard to get things in because you can't bring freighters or whatever. Jita should be more expensive than other trade hubs, and not necessarily. So the reason why Jita isn't more expensive than other trade hubs is because most of the other trade hubs are filled by buying things in Jita and then hauling them. The other markets are closer to like quickie marts, convenience stores, than, you know, big block stores. Seeding is about assurance over profit. Yeah, it's critical for us indie guys in Null. Yeah, exactly. Like, the point is coverage. That's a tricky thing because you got to realize, like, so there's the Tech 2 modules, obviously, but then there's the metas, and you got to know which metas people end up using, you know, like micro warp drive. Enduring versus restrained. Restrained is better than enduring, but people still use enduring. Everywhere else in Eve is a bodega. That's a, yeah, okay. Right. Jita's Costco is probably a good one. I wouldn't even say, well, yeah, I guess Costco's a pretty good. It's there's a word for like the place that people buy, like stores can buy from them. Retail outlet? No. Wholesalers. There you go. Thank you. So what I think is going on, like what's obvious with the skyhooks is that the walls are going back up, right? The big thing, like our attitude about the change to the skyhook was like, oh my God, they gave up on it or whatever. But I think that we got to remember like what the whole point of Equinox was in the first place, right? In the end, nullsec needs to be a place worth living in. And there's a tricky thing that I like to call get to do versus have to do. You know, when we have moons and we mine the moons, when it's popular, it gets mined out really quick and people complain that we don't have more moons. But if you keep adding moons, eventually you hit a point where now either there's a dip in play or you overextend a little bit too much. And now there are rocks and there are people that are mining it, not because they're excited about the opportunity or whatever, but because they're there and they need to be mined and, you know, they drudgingly do it. It switches from something that they get to do. Hey guys, we've got mining fleets, to something we have to do. Guys, we got to get these rocks finished, right? And that is a very critical thing when it comes to video games because people tend to not do what they don't want to do, right? Especially, like, why would I do something? Like, why would I drudge? Why would it harbors resentment and bad feelings and whatnot. So the problem is, and this is something I was concerned about with Equinox from the beginning, the question is, did they make nullsec a more exciting place to live, or did they add in more busy work that people have to do? And unfortunately, it seems incredibly clear, even under the best of scenarios, the answer is the latter. Now, obviously, it had a bunch of problems with balancing and all that stuff. They've been working on that. There's a whole thing about how you want to start low and ratchet your way up until you hit the sweet spot, you know, because nobody likes nerfs. There's a bunch of stuff with that, you know, whatever. But how does this relate to skyhooks? Well, ultimately speaking, skyhooks are supposed to be something that nullsec want to have, right? And if every skyhook is just another way for people to annoy you, like not even do damage, just annoy you, then you've actually made living in nullsec worse. And that's bad. So it makes sense for CCP to be like, you know what? Like, we focused a lot on what people can do to nullsec. Again, remember what I was just saying about Zarzakh, right? It's the idea that people from the outside of it exploiting it to their own ends at the expense of those who live in that space. And that is what it's all been about, right? It was that way in scarcity. It's what the ESS was about. It's what needlejack filaments are about. It's what nullsec complains about. So when you bring them their new thing and it's just more of that, why would they be happy? So what do you do about that? Ultimately, it should be mostly a nullsec thing. And I think that this makes it that. Now, there is, we can look, actually. We can see they've actually done something pretty cool. On the map, you can see skyhooks that are vulnerable on the map. So not only can you open up the agency and do it, but like you can get a visible representation of where things are and see what's going on. Now, I don't know if it's easy to know how long it's going to be open still. But the point is that, like, we can see that in any given area of space, there's at least a few. And as skyhooks become more popular, as we noticed as we were going through nullsec, there's a whole lot of skyhooks, especially, or there's a whole lot of planets, especially ice and lava planets, that don't have skyhooks on them. So as that increases, there will be more of these skyhooks potentially to raid, but it's not something that you can just do over and over and over again, force somebody to react to it, because otherwise you're just going to keep ruining their day, whatnot. It still allows for people to raid in and get something out of it without turning it into the biggest pain in the ass since Intosis links for nullsec players. And I think that the fact that the mercenary dens again reinforce this, right? These are for the people that live in the space. They need things to do. They need to engage with it. They need to feel like they belong to something and that it is giving them something. And we need to be able to just respect that. Yes, Goon Swarm is moving to Tenerifis. Correct. So yeah, I mean, do I think that 3 days is too long? Yes. Especially with 1 hour. I think it would be more interesting if it was, I think that there's definitely some balance to be done, but I can definitely see why we need to change the way that we think about these features. The skyhooks isn't for us, per se. And passive income for null blocks was a big part of the fuel that made wars work. The goons are moving right now, arguably because of the fact that the new space is better for them in different ways, right? So the return of passive income isn't just necessarily good, but it might be essential to make space feel worth fighting for on an empire level. I think it's a constant tug of war between null be fun and null has to maintain control over their space. I agree with you. I don't think that this. I think that this is part of that balance. I think that I think that this is part of that tug of war. It certainly is not null is only fun. I think if my prediction about the Atavum and the ability for nullsec to just shut down a system for a while so that way they can rat in peace, that might be going a little bit too far. But just having only some of your skyhooks vulnerable at any given time, Skyhook, it's need to be dead space. I don't like that. Well, the problem is that both sides can use that fact that it's not dead space to good effect. I like the idea of like a Sino jammer more than a dead space, by dead space specifically. I do think about the wormholers that will now have a harder time rolling their hole to get stuff to run their Metanox. But overall, I think that the Skyhook change and the things coming in Revenant for nullsec, like the new complex, are really about giving the people that live in nullsec something to do that they want to do. And I think that that's important. Is it really even worth running a Metanox in a wormhole? Can be. The thing is that R4 is good because it's used in building battleships and other stuff like that. I miss the economic podcasts, my economic podcast, because Oz still does his. It's useful to do R4 reactions in wormhole space because wormhole space is one of the places you can do R4 reactions. Yeah, I think Oz is even working for or running for CSM. And working for CSM, I think, right? I think. I don't know. Too much going on. So the idea that they can build it within, like, the problem is mining the R4 is the dangerous part in wormhole space. It's not worth it to mine it. But if you have a Metanox drill, just drilling it up, it could very well be useful just for the sake of, like, internal, like, relying only on your own stuff. Oz is CSM 8, yeah. 18, yeah. In terms of ISK space. Yeah, well, the thing is that this ISK faucet that they've added is a new thing, which is important. I don't know if Moongoo is even a good example because this is kind of just Moongoo 2.0, right? Meh. I guess one thing that they can do is just continue to put in new uses for lava and ice. Yeah, I mean, Moongoo 2.0 is, I mean, I think that that's what it is. That's what it is. But that's the thing, is that passive moon mining was bad for miners because miners weren't respected because it wasn't worth it compared to passive moon mining. But at the same time, like, that passive income was what alliances fought over. The Deathless site generators is new content, though. That's true. That's a new site. Also, I mean, like, the 2 new ships and the new weapon system is huge, right? So, like, that can be a big one. Now that I've said that, I think about, like, into the Abyss, right? The expansion that introduced the Triglavians. We had a new weapon system with 4? I want to say 4, maybe 5 different ships, and the entirety of the Abyss added. So I don't know if a new crab beacon is the equivalent of the entirety of the Abyss, but we also have the new Skinner stuff, which is a big deal, and maybe some other stuff we haven't heard of yet, but not like major stuff. So, although, I mean, we really, here's actually what my prediction is about this, okay? I am not sure if whatever is decloaking here is going to be part of the expansion's release, right? Fighting Drifters will be new content. I agree. That stuff hasn't been talked about at all. So either it's a missing piece or this story is playing out slightly slower than we think, right? You know, a lot of times, I mean, let's just put it this way. 2 years ago, I predicted Deathless ships because I saw that Deathless had Mimitar and Kaldari people working together, right? So they were clearly working towards that. But it took them a long time to get there. Like, it takes longer for these things to roll out. You know, time passes in real time, right? So it could very well be that whatever it is isn't fully activated by next month, but it could be something that comes in the month two after, because Revenant expansion is the entire 6-month cycle. So it could go either way. But hopefully we'll have more information about that on Thursday. With that said, I have been Astronaut. I've been playing this game since 2010, talking about it since 2012, and I'm here to put even to context for you, my fellow Empyreans. Thank you guys so much for checking this out. Thank you for hanging out, liking the stream, sharing it with your friends, because that is how we get this information out there, make a more knowledgeable player base. If this stream was too short for you, then I recommend, if you have not done it already, you should check out yesterday's stream. It was a lot of fun, and, it's crazy. They talk about streamer luck, but every once in a while, actually more often for me than I deserve, there's just a run that just goes flawlessly, allows me to demonstrate all the things I want to demonstrate, and do so in exactly the right amount of time. And yesterday's Yeet exploration video fits that bill. I was very happy about that.